Hello, and welcome to lesson 97 of the Learning Guitar series. With this particular lesson, we're going to shift our attention from left-hand studies to right-hand studies, and we're going to start from finger picking. At the same time, bear in mind, these lessons can also be seen as a continuation of our chord studies. In fact, the moment we look at the PDF, you'll see that all this finger picking thing is framed anyway in a way where you're still practicing chords. If anything, it will also help you to retain them because we're giving them an even more musical kind of context compared to just starting with diagrams. Wanted to talk about, right hand in general, and I've probably touched upon this in the past, but we have to touch upon the concept of posture, how we're supposed to hold the guitar. And unlike other instruments, a piano comes to mind, guitar is one of those instruments where we don't really agree upon what would be the perfect posture. Let's put it that way. Of course, the classical guitar position with the guitar on your left leg surely is probably the most efficient and one of those that probably will spare you from possible injuries. In a way, mainly because when the guitar is in this position, your wrist is much more straight, so especially if you do stretches and stuff, it's less prone of injuries compared to when the guitar is on your right leg and now your wrist is in a very awkward position. And in fact, you might notice even modern guitar player, I'm thinking John Petrucci or I'm thinking Joe Satriani, or the moment they try and play more complicated passages or very stretched passages, they move the guitar. I mean, I know Satriani practiced that way, having it, on the left leg. And Petrucci's got a little device that he uses live where he can rest his leg, for that kind of thing. But I'm sure, you've seen many different guitar players having very, very many different posture, even the way the pick is held, or if their hand is here, if the hand is here, we go on and on. There's, plus, as modern guitar players, we tend to stand up, at least during performances. So this kind of position, like the left leg, there's no guitar on leg, as a matter of fact. Nevertheless, having said all this, a kind of common starting point, at least when it comes to finger picking. And then after that, feel free to experiment with whatever you feel comfortable. But it would be for at least, your arm to kind of rest on the guitar. And as you can see, the moment it rests on the guitar, your hand automatically assumes this kind of position, which is a good starting point for finger picking. One thing which might be important, like your thumb, separated from the rest of your fingers. Try not to have it this way, but rather this way. And regarding nails, I mean, you might want to have, nails at least coming like, 1-2 millimeters after where the skin is, makes it easier, At the same time, as I said, these are all, let's say, basic rules, but, I'm sure you could. See, you can arpeggiate, finger pick this way, and it's not this way, But I would feel remiss if I didn't mention it. Let's have a look at the PDF that comes with this lesson, so you have an idea on how this develops. So you have a bunch of exercises. They're kind of divided by, by letters. So this first bar is one exercise, and you just loop it, and the second exercise, and it goes from until letter G, if I remember well. It's quite a few pages. We're starting from a very simple pattern, and if we kind of give a number to our right hand fingers, 1, 2, 3, and 4, okay? And we're going to talk about the pinky at some point, but for the moment, we're using 4 fingers. The pattern designed in this particular PDF is literally 1, 2, 3, 4. So any chord you're playing is always 1, 2, 3, 4. And in fact, if you look at exercise A, you have a C chord, an A minor chord, a D minor chord, and a G chord. And the only thing that shifts is When you're playing D minor, you're shifting all your hand one string down, and of course the bass. So this particular exercise has got, although the chords for the left hand, that's fairly simple. Two interesting points we're tackling. First of all, when we're playing C major, all easy, but we're using string 5, 4, 3, and 2. And we're doing it twice. A minor. The moment we're playing D minor, you might want to shift the entire right hand one string down. And the other interesting point, that at some point your thumb gets in charge of bass, which means when you're playing G, you go back with these 3 fingers, you go back to string 2, 3, and 4, but the bass is not playing string 5 anymore, but string 6. And you have this kind of and you want to repeat it as a loop. It's particularly important at this stage that you use a metronome. Maybe you put a metronome at a speed where each click is highlighting one finger. So in this case, the metronome probably would be around 150, maybe 160 when it's playing ta 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 ta. That's particularly important as an annotation because at the end of the day, it's a bit like having 4 picks at the same time, as opposed to just one. Slight detour in terms of if, you might have used finger picking before, or you're approaching this for the first time. Maybe you are a kind of guitar player who uses a pick, for all your lead work. So you might want also to consider rewriting these kind of exercises instead of being finger 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe if you have a pick at this point, the pick obviously is being used by 2 fingers. So now your 1, 2, 3, 4 will imply your pinky. So basically this becomes 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you have this kind of finger. So if that's what you want to go for, you might want to go for this kind of approach from the very beginning. And again, we go back to the idea behind muscle memory and photographic memory. So if you spend a lot of time playing with your fingers, then when you're trying to do the same thing now with pick and introducing also the pinky, you might struggle at first. But as with everything, you can always bring the metronome down, do it very slowly, and you will create new habits. So again, at the same time, I don't want to say that if you do one way, you can never go back and do it differently. Another option, which kind of comes from the days of banjo and country music, is to use a thumb pick. So, for example, if I use a thumb pick, which is something that I kind of do often actually, for those gigs where I know that sometimes I have lead lines, but sometimes I also have arpeggiated parts. And so if you use a thumb pick, now you're back to 1, 2, 3, 4, obviously. And of course, you can always switch to play with a pick like you normally would. It takes some get used to, but again, it's another possible solution in terms of how you could approach finger picking. One thing you might want to pay attention to if you use a thumb pick, obviously, is like the tone that you're getting from the pick is kind of different from the tone you might get from your fingers, which is got definitely more attack and is slightly brighter compared to. So when you're practicing, trying kind of use the pick in a more subdued way, or trying to kind of match the tone that you get from the fingers, so it doesn't stand out as, because it's also much louder, right? So you try and, compared to just using a thumb. Let's have a look at exercise B and the reason for it to be there. So with exercise B, kind of similar, just a different harmony. In this case, we're just moving our thumb in order to follow the bass in the F chord, F minor 7. So in this case, you just have F major, C major, A minor, F major, F minor, C major. And as you can see, like, these are nice harmonic progression. That's why I say like it's interesting in terms of also retaining chords. The particular thing about this exercise is now you're moving from open chord to bar chord, which obviously implies a movement of the wrist from this position to this position, but also means that there is going to be a slight little moment of silence, which are disguising in a way, because for this kind of open chords, obviously the strings are always ringing. The moment you move it, this will happen. You see the sound is stopping just because I'm moving my hand, and you're kind of disguising it, trying to have the timing here becomes very, very relevant. But yeah. Exercise C. We have A7. Now we're moving basically our chord on the first, second, and third string, and the bass depends where the chord is. And we have A7 to D major to D minor, back to A, to E major, to G major, to D major. So, in other words, what's happening, like, again, we have 6 strings, but we're using 4 fingers. And generally, take it with a pinch of salt, but generally the thumb is in charge of bass. And the bass tends to be, most of the time, on either the 6th string or the 5th string. Although, if you think of the D chord, that's when it automatically moves on the 4th string. When it comes to the other 3 fingers, it's not unusual that they are playing string 2, 3, and 4 that combine with the bass gets us the chord. But obviously we can also use string 1, 2, and 3, and then the thumb moves around to get the bass, which is the purpose of this particular exercise. And in fact, you have A7, D major, D minor, A major, E major, G, D. I'll do it again. The purpose of exercise D is to start looking at more sophisticated type of chords, as you can see. And again, it goes back to that retaining of things. And you have, motions across, it's a kind of a mixture of what we've done so far. But in this case, you have kind of a musical type of progression and interesting voicings. So in this case, you have C major, B minor 7, B major 6, A7, D minor, shift all the fingers down, F, sus2, G, E major, it's an interesting, I'll play it a little bit faster so you can hear how it kind of moves. So now we're using still the same pattern, which by now you will have done it enough time to start developing like a muscle memory of it, but it's still 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But harmonically, we're starting to combine some more interesting chords, which are not just, open chord, the C major, A minor, F kind of thing. In fact, if you look at exercise E, which resolves over 2 pages, again, you have some interesting harmonic progression where you have E, D over F sharp, G. I mean, I'll kind of play it to you. Probably it's easier that way. So you have, E major, D over F sharp, G, E over G sharp, A minor 7, B flat 6, 9, G minor 11, B7, E major 7, D over F sharp, G major 7, E over G sharp, A minor 9, G major 7, F sharp, half diminished, B7, and then you're back. It's an interesting progression. I'll have the chart here just for a second. I'll play it again, and you can see, part of the chart. There you go. You should be able to see it all. Last but not least, we have a couple more actually. Exercise F. And exercise F is dedicated to moving the bass in fifths. So again, in terms of the rest of the fingers, finger 2, 3, and 4, they are mainly moving on string 1, 2, and 3. But as you can see now, the bass is actually moving in fifths. What that means that for each chord, you're not only playing the root note, but you also play the fifth. You bounce back and forth. And it's basically this kind of, if you think of the C chord, is this kind of sound. When I'm alternating basically the root note of the chord, C, but also its fifth. And, typical of, if you want to think of that, but also typical of other styles like bossa nova, for example. Plus, it's a good skill to have, it's good to know where your fifths are. And if you look at this particular exercise, so basically what we have is C, B7, E minor, A7, back to C, G, F, B7, and back to C. Now, there are definitely a couple of interesting points about this last piece. It's beside the moving of the bass in fifth, which is a very good exercise per se. And most commonly, you'll notice that when your chord has its root on the string 6, its fifth is going to be on string 5, a tone above it. So say if I have a G chord and that's my root, now this is my fifth. While when you have a chord with its root on the 5th string, or on the 4th string, as a matter of fact, so the D chord. So root on the 5th string, C chord, the 5th tends to be just above. So you'll often, but the moment I play F, now that's where my 5th is. One exception is the shape of G, so I can use literally a G chord, where the 5th is actually a tone and a half down and 2 strings away. So if you use the shape of G, so here is your 5th, and it comes from this arpeggio. So in the case of the G chord that you'll find in that chart, here is your bass. Anyway, once you start playing that exercise, it will become even more clear. Now, exercise G is surely the most complex in a way because of the chords it's using. Again, the pattern is still 1, 2, 3, 4, and also the longest one as it's developed over 32 bars. And it's not an etude per se, but it's probably the closest thing to it at this stage, where now we're using that pattern, but it's quite an elaborated piece with elaborated chords. I'll play it to you so you see what I mean. So I'll play it to you, and I'll have to make the chart a little bit smaller on the screen, but just because so you can see at least one page at a time. And we start from C major 7, C major 13, F7, F9, E minor 7, E minor 9, A7 sharp 5, A7, D minor 9, D minor 7, G13, G7. Shifting strings for C minor 7, C minor 6. Now the bass is shifting for F7, F9. We are to the next page. And we go to the second page where we have B flat major 7, E flat 7, E flat major 7, E flat major 9, A flat 7 for 1 bar, G7 sharp 5, 1 bar, C major 7, C major 9, C sharp diminished, C sharp diminished, D minor 11, D minor, G7 flat 9, D flat 13, C. So as you can see, this is quite a little bit more elaborated piece, but as I mentioned, this is doing fingerpicking is a great excuse for us to retain chords, but this time in a very musical manner, because overall these pieces are pleasant enough musically for you to feel like playing them. Of course, at the moment we're only doing 1, 2, 3, 4, and the idea that everything is focused on that is so that you develop muscle memory of it. Depending on how much time you spend practicing, of course, you can at some point think, okay, instead of doing 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm just going to do everything 1, 4, 3, 2. In the future, we'll elaborate a different pattern of what the right hand can do. This is a starting point, but, if you're playing 4 or 5 hours a day, feel free at some point, that muscle memory will develop reasonably quickly. So feel free at some point to invert maybe the pattern. For the moment, at least keep the 1 in the bar to be the bass. That's the only thing. Put the bass on the 1. That might help. Last but not least, can we use also this as a template for practice lead playing? Of course we can. We can take any of this exercise, and the moment we loop them, maybe with the aid of a loop pedal, or if you have a DAW, GarageBand, one of those things, you can record this progression, loop it, and then play on top of it. So if we take, I'll show you for exercise maybe 1 and 2, A and B. Exercise 8 is just C major, A minor, D minor, G, which means everything is diatonic to C. C Ionian or the C major pentatonic will resolve that progression. Like, I don't have to think about multiple scales. I'll show you what I mean. So fairly simple. At the end, all I did, I superimposed C minor pentatonic over, something that's supposed to be C major, and we get alterations. It's the blues, just a flat 3. If we take the second progression, now we'll have to some point to change scale and use the arpeggios, because the progression goes C major, A minor, F, and all those 3 chords are diatonic to C, so C Ionian would do. But then you have an F minor, and that takes us to a different key. And we're done modes, so F minor is a minor chord, and if I think within the realm of major modes, so that F minor can be F minor Dorian, and with lower sound. It could be F minor Phrygian, it could be F minor Aeolian. And we can approach it all, in all these different ways. I'll show you how it sounds. So depending on, how much you studied all my previous lessons, as a matter of fact, you could take any of these exercises. And of course, letter G in particular, obviously, which is the most complicated from an harmonic point of view, piece, where, by now you will have to know what you're doing. Although I might write some notes, maybe put the next lesson on what scales you could use on each chord. But of course, you're navigating many, many keys. Let's see if I can actually remember. If I remember the piece, I'll loop it. It's 32 bars. I'll try and do it kind of faster, so that gives you an idea. this is fun, right? But of course, like, this implies now kind of model playing, and every chord can have, whatever. If it's a major chord, you can go higher when you're leading. There's a lot of thinking, but again, depending on how much you studied on my previous lesson, and if you feel like I cannot yet tackle it, well, that means that probably you still have to look at some harmony theory. Anyway, it's enough for this lesson. It's been a long one, and quite one of those that kind of detours into many territory at once. But, the PDF is kind of clear in terms of what needs to be done. Thank you for listening. Until next time. Thank you. Goodbye.